The radio transmission crackled through the Arctic Research Station, distorted by the interference of the howling wind outside. The voice on the other end was sharp, breathless, and laced with something unnerving, something that sent an immediate chill through the room, colder than the ice beyond their walls. "I don't know how to describe it," the fisherman's voice came through, muffled by static. "I've seen sick bears before, but this one, it's wrong." Logan Reyes, head of the Arctic Wildlife Conservation Team, turned towards Sarah, his second-in-command, whose fingers hovered over the radio dial. She frowned, adjusting the frequency to clear the distortion. The station was small, just 6 researchers crammed into an outpost miles from civilization, where they monitored changes in Arctic wildlife, particularly polar bears. But they had never heard a call like this. "What do you mean, wrong?" Logan asked, his voice measured but tight. Silence on the line. Then, a deep, shaky breath. The kind of breath people take before saying something they don't quite believe themselves. "It's got barnacles all over it." Logan felt his stomach turn. He exchanged a glance with Sarah, who looked just as thrown. Barnacles? That didn't make sense. Barnacles were marine parasites. They latched onto whales, boats, anything that stayed in the water long enough. Not land mammals, not a predator that roamed the Arctic tundra. He leaned into the radio. "You're saying this bear is covered in barnacles?" The fisherman's voice dropped lower, like he didn't want to be overheard. "They're inside it too." Silence. A heavy kind, the kind that weighed the air down like an approaching storm. Logan felt his heartbeat pick up. Inside it? Sarah inhaled sharply. The other researchers in the room had stopped what they were doing, eyes locked onto the radio, like it was about to say something impossible. The fisherman continued. "It's not moving like a bear. It's not hunting. It's not even scared of my boat. It just stands there, breathing, and Jesus Christ." The transmission cut out. A static-filled hum buzzed through the station, the only sound in the room. No one moved. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. "We need to check it out." Logan hesitated. His instincts told him this wasn't just a sick bear. This was something else, something bigger. But what choice did they have? After a long beat, he exhaled. "Gear up. We leave in 15. The helicopter's blades cut through the still, endless Arctic sky as the team flew toward the coordinates the fishermen had provided. Below them, the vast ice field stretched in every direction, an unforgiving wasteland of white and gray. It was eerily quiet, too quiet. Even out here, there should have been signs of life, seabirds maybe, or even a distant trail of a moving bear. But there was nothing. Sarah, seated next to Logan, stared out the window. "Something's off?" Logan didn't answer. He was too busy watching the ground. Then he saw them. Tracks. A single set of deep, heavy paw prints in the snow. But something was wrong. The prints only went in one direction. There were no return tracks, no sign that the bear had wandered, circled back, or even stopped. It had just kept going. Where? And more importantly, why? The helicopter touched down a safe distance away, the ice groaning under the weight of the skids. Logan and the team disembarked quickly, moving across the snow with precision, each step carefully calculated. The wind had picked up, carrying a low, distant sound across the ice. Not the wind, not the helicopter, something else. A deep, rattling exhale. It sounded wrong, like something struggling to breathe through broken glass. Sarah gripped Logan's arm, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's not normal." Logan nodded, heart hammering in his chest. He knew. They followed the tracks, weapons at the ready, emergency sedatives on hand. Every step forward felt heavier, like they were pushing against some invisible force. And then, they saw it. At first, it was just a massive white shape in the snow, lying motionless. The wind blew fragments of ice and dust over its body, partially burying it. But as they moved closer, the details came into view, and Logan felt his stomach drop. The bear was enormous, but its fur was patchy, raw, blood-matted, and its skin was moving. Sarah gagged. The barnacles were burrowed into its flesh, deep and unnatural. They weren't just attached, they were embedded, crawling, twisting. The wounds underneath them weren't just open sores, they were honeycombed, hollow, as if something had eaten through the muscle. The smell hit them next. Rot. salt, something worse. And then the bear opened its eyes, bloodshot, cloudy, dead, but still alive. For a moment, it just stared at them, and then it collapsed. The sound of its massive body hitting the ice echoed in the empty wasteland. No one moved, no one breathed. Logan's mind screamed at him to do something, to move, to react, but his body was frozen. Because looking at this thing, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't just staring at a dying bear. He was staring at something he was never supposed to see. The wind howled across the ice, lifting small flurries of snow over the motionless body of the bear. No one spoke, no one moved. It should have been dead. Everything about it screamed death. The pallid skin beneath its patchy, frost-covered fur, the swollen, infected wounds, the barnacles that should never have been there. Yet somehow, it was still breathing. A deep, slow, wet kind of breath. The kind of breath that shouldn't be coming from a land animal. The kind of breath that sounded like something was drowning inside its own body. Logan Reyes took a cautious step forward, ignoring the tightening in his chest. He had seen sick polar bears before, thin, starving, slowly succumbing to the melting Arctic. But this was different. This wasn't starvation. This was something else. Sarah swallowed beside him, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Logan, what the hell are we looking at?" He didn't answer. Instead, he crouched lower, gripping the tranquilizer gun slung across his shoulder. Protocol said they should observe first, keep their distance, report back before intervening. But Logan already knew. No report would prepare anyone for this. The bear shifted slightly, a slow, involuntary twitch. Its body shuddered, and something cracked deep in its throat. Logan froze. The others stepped back. Even Michael, the team's veterinarian, who had spent years treating Arctic wildlife, let out a quiet, involuntary curse. Because now they could hear it. A low, bubbling sound beneath the bear's labored breathing. It was coming from inside it, like something was moving under its skin. Logan clenched his jaw. "We sedate it! Now!" Sarah's eyes flicked to him, uncertain. "We don't even know if it can..." "We don't have time to know." They moved quickly. Logan pulled the tranquilizer rifle from his pack, loading the dart with a double dose, enough to bring down a fully grown grizzly. He aimed, fired. The dart hit the bear's shoulder. No reaction, not even a flinch. Logan's stomach clenched. That should have done something. Sarah loaded a second dart, fired. It hit near the base of the bear's neck, sinking into the thick, matted fur. Still nothing. A sickening thought crept into Logan's mind. What if the sedative isn't working? What if it's already too far gone? And then the bear's breathing changed, slower, heavier. It shifted slightly. The breath rattled. Then, finally, its body sagged. Logan exhaled. The others did too. But even sedated, the bear looked wrong. The barnacles were deeply embedded in the open wounds, twisting, almost alive. Sarah reached out with a gloved hand, cautiously pressing the edges of the nearest wound. And Logan watched as her entire body went rigid. She let out a strangled noise. Half a gasp, half a curse. And stumbled backward, her boots sliding in the ice. Michael caught her before she fell. "Sarah?" She stared at the bear, her face pale beneath the Arctic windburn. "It's not just the barnacles." Her voice was barely above a whisper. She lifted her shaking gloved hand. It was wet. Logan felt his pulse spike. Blood? Number? Not blood. Something thicker. Darker. Sarah turned her hand so they could all see. It was black. Something that shouldn't have been inside a polar bear. Something that looked like it had been living there. And in that moment, Logan realized they weren't dealing with just a sick animal. They were dealing with something that had no name. The wind screamed across the tundra, a relentless force that cut through layers of fabric and skin alike. But the real storm was brewing inside their team. The bear lay motionless, its body a monument of suffering on the frozen ground. The grotesque wounds, the parasitic growths burrowed deep into its flesh. It wasn't supposed to be like this. And yet here it was, a living contradiction, a dying creature still clinging to life. Logan wiped his face with a gloved hand, his pulse hammering against his ribs. This was bigger than them, bigger than anything they had prepared for. And now they had a choice to make: intervene or let nature take its course. Sarah broke first. "We can't leave it like this," she said, her voice tight, trembling under the weight of what she was seeing. "This isn't a mercy death. This is something else." Michael, the team's veterinarian, exhaled sharply, his hands gripping the straps of his medical bag so hard his knuckles turned white. "We're scientists, Sarah, not God." She turned to him, her eyes flashing with something sharp, unrelenting. "So what? We just leave it to suffer? We let it rot alive?" Michael stood his ground. "What do you think happens if we save it?" He gestured to the bear, its labored breathing louder now, heavier. "Do you think this is the only one out here? That this is an isolated case?" A beat of silence. No one wanted to say it, because they all knew. If this bear existed, then there would be others, and they couldn't save them all. "This is different." Logan's voice cut through the frigid air, firm but strained. They turned to him, waiting, watching. Logan ran a hand down his face, his breath visible in the frozen air. "This isn't just a climate-stricken bear. It's not just starving. Something infected it, something unnatural. We have a responsibility to find out what that is." Michael let out a bitter laugh. "A responsibility?" He shook his head, his breath fogging up his scarf. "You know what I think? I think you want to save this bear because you don't want to admit that we lost." Sarah stiffened. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Michael turned to her, his expression hard, unreadable. "Look at it. This isn't just a dying animal. It's a warning." Sarah shook her head. "No, it's not." "Yes, it is," Michael snapped. "And you know it. This is what happens when we push a species to the edge of extinction, when we force it to adapt in ways it never should have. You want to save it? Fine. But what happens next? What happens when the next one comes and the next and the next? How many do we save before we admit we can't fix what's broken?" Silence. The words hung heavy between them. Sarah swallowed, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "So what, Michael? We just stand here and watch it die?" Michael didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. They both already knew the answer. Logan's radio crackled to life. "Base to Reyes, what's your status?" The command center, waiting for a report, waiting for orders. Logan lifted the radio with a shaking hand, but didn't respond right away. His eyes flicked back to the bear, its ribs rising and falling with effort, each breath a reminder that it was still alive. His mind was at war. He saw Sarah's determination, the desperation in her eyes. And he saw Michael's exhaustion, the resignation of a man who had seen too much, lost too much, and knew the cruel reality of the world. They were both right, and they were both wrong. But there was no middle ground. They had to decide. Now Logan's fingers hovered over the radio switch. His mouth felt dry. His chest ached. Finally, he pressed the button. His voice was hoarse but steady. "We're intervening?" Sarah exhaled sharply, relief flooding her face. Michael closed his eyes, shaking his head. But the choice had been made. They would fight. Even if, deep down, Logan knew, this was a fight they had already lost. Logan's voice still echoed in his own head as he clipped the radio back onto his vest. "We're intervening." The words had barely left his lips, but they felt like a noose tightening around his throat. This was the moment everything changed. Sarah didn't hesitate. She was already moving, reaching into the medical kit, pulling out syringes, gauze, antiseptic, the tools of a battlefield medic, not a wildlife rescue team. Michael was slower, resigned. His hands were steady, but his eyes were that of a man who knew they were about to cross a line they couldn't uncross. And Logan was stuck between the two realities: save the bear or acknowledge that nothing they did would matter. He forced himself to focus. They had already made their decision. There was no time for doubt now. The bear wasn't moving. It was still breathing, barely. The black fluid seeped from its wounds, staining the snow in thick ink-like blotches. Up close, it looked worse, much worse. The barnacles weren't just attached to its body. They were embedded. Some had even burrowed deep, leaving behind honeycombed holes where flesh should have been. And something inside those wounds was moving. Logan felt bile rise in his throat. Sarah knelt beside the massive creature, pressing 2 fingers to its side. Her gloved hands trembled. Its heartbeat is slow, too slow. And Michael hovered beside her, but Logan could see it in his face. He was already detaching, like he was preparing himself for what he knew was coming. Logan clenched his jaw. Not yet. They weren't losing this fight yet. Let's stabilize it, he ordered. Then we figure out what the hell is happening to it. Sarah prepped a syringe, a high-dose antibiotic mixed with painkillers. Michael hesitated. We don't even know if that will help, or if its body will reject it. Sarah didn't look at him. We don't know if it won't. She plunged the needle into the bear's thick, matted fur. The liquid disappeared into its system. Seconds passed. Then, a minute. Nothing. Logan exhaled slowly, tension coiling around his spine. Had they waited too long? Was the infection too advanced? And then, the bear twitched. A full-body, violent jerk. Sarah stumbled back, nearly dropping the syringe. Michael cursed. The bear's chest heaved. Its entire body shuddered, and the sound that came out of its throat was wrong. Deep, wet, gurgling. Logan stepped forward instinctively, placing a firm hand on Sarah's shoulder. Then he saw it. The black fluid was retracting, not fading, not healing, moving, like something alive was retreating under the surface, like it knew, like it was hiding. A tremor shot through Logan's body. Sarah looked up at him, eyes wide. What the hell did we just do? Michael didn't speak. Instead, he reached into his bag, pulling out a scalpel. Logan tensed. Michael, we need a sample. Logan wanted to stop him. His instinct screamed at him that this wasn't normal, that this wasn't something they should be dealing with. But his logic told him they had no other choice. Michael pressed the blade against one of the barnacle-infested wounds. The skin peeled away too easily, like it wasn't even attached, and underneath... Oh God, Michael staggered back. Sarah gasped. Because inside the wound, buried deep within the bear's muscle, was movement. Not bacteria, not decay, something alive, something writhing. Sarah clapped a hand over her mouth. That's... Michael's voice was barely above a whisper. It's spreading. Logan's mind raced. This wasn't just a sick bear. This was an infection, a parasite, something unnatural. And if one bear had it, how many others were out there? His radio crackled. Base to Reyes, we need an update. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe, because he already knew the answer. They weren't just trying to save a bear. They were trying to stop something much, much worse. The moment stretched too long, a suffocating silence weighed down by the impossible, the unnatural. Logan felt his pulse in his throat, an uneven rhythm that didn't match the slow, wet drip of blackened fluid pooling in the ice. The bear was still unconscious, its breathing ragged, its body failing beneath them. And yet, something inside it still lived. Something thrived. Michael stepped back, his face unreadable, but Logan knew that look. It was the same haunted stare of men who had seen too much, too late. Sarah still had her hands over her mouth, trembling. No one spoke, because there were no words for what they had just witnessed. Then, the bear spasmed. Sarah yelped, scrambling away, her boots slipping on the ice. Logan whipped around, gripping the tranquilizer rifle, but he already knew. It wouldn't matter. The sedation wasn't enough. It had never been enough. The bear's ribs cracked audibly, its entire frame convulsing violently as if something inside was moving, expanding. Logan's stomach turned. The black liquid was spreading. Not like an infection, not like decay, like something intelligent. Michael was breathing hard now, his eyes darting to Logan's, searching for an answer, a plan. Logan had none, because how the hell do you fight something you don't understand? Then the sound changed. The bear wasn't growling, it wasn't snarling in pain, it was gurgling, like something was rising in its throat. Sarah's hand clenched around Logan's jacket. We need to leave. But Logan was frozen. The bear's mouth opened, and inside Dash. It wasn't just teeth, it was barnacles, embedded along the inside of its gums, curling along its tongue like tumors. The infection had reached its throat, and it was moving. A single thin tendril of black mass slithered between the bear's teeth, slow, hesitant, like it was testing the air. And then it twitched toward them. Logan fired. The dart struck dead center in the bear's neck. The creature convulsed again, harder, the black tendril recoiling back into its mouth. Sarah grabbed Logan's wrist. "We can't keep doing this." Michael's voice was sharp. "We need to put it down." The words should have made sense, but they didn't. Because Logan wasn't just looking at a suffering animal, he was looking at something that wasn't supposed to exist. Something that had already changed. Something that would not die easily. Michael was already moving, rifle in hand. "Logan, get out of the way!" Logan's instincts kicked in. He stepped between them. Michael stopped cold. "Move." Logan didn't. Sarah's breath hitched beside him. "We don't know what this is," Logan said, forcing his voice to remain steady. "We don't know what happens if we kill it." Michael's jaw tightened. "We don't know what happens if we don't." A pulse of fear spread through Logan's chest. He knew Michael was right. They couldn't contain this. They couldn't treat it. They had no protocol for this. This wasn't a rescue. This was a disaster waiting to happen. But something deep, instinctual told Logan that putting the bear down wouldn't fix anything. That whatever was inside it would keep moving, keep surviving. That maybe killing it would set something worse in motion. His mind was a war zone of doubt and certainty. And before he could make a decision, the bear moved again. Michael raised the rifle, but Logan shoved him. The shot missed. Michael staggered back, stunned. Silence. Then a sound that didn't belong, a click, a radio. Someone was listening. Logan's blood ran cold. Sarah's gaze snapped to the comms device strapped to Michael's vest. And then, a voice. One that wasn't theirs. "Bring it back." The signal cut out. The wind roared, and Logan realized they were never alone. The radio crackled, then fell silent. No one moved, no one breathed. The wind screamed across the ice, but the sound that still rang in Logan's head was that voice. "Bring it back." Not, "It's dangerous." Not, "We're sending backup." Not, "Eliminate it." "Bring it back." Logan felt the blood drain from his face. Sarah whispered, barely able to force the words out. "Who the hell was that?" Michael stared at his radio, eyes locked on the device like it had just spoken the devil's name. But Logan already knew. They weren't the first to find this bear. Someone already knew what was happening here, and someone wanted it alive. Michael ripped the radio from his vest, twisting the dial. Static. No reply, no identification, nothing. Sarah took a sharp step back. "Logan, this isn't just an environmental disaster, is it?" Logan's stomach twisted. Number? It never was. The bear wasn't just sick. It wasn't just infected. It was experimented on. And now the people who did this wanted it back. Logan's mind snapped into focus. The bear was still there. Still convulsing. Still a threat. But now, so was someone else. Sarah was already thinking ahead. "We need to get out of here." Michael shook his head. "And go where?" He gestured to the ice, the sky, the storm closing in on them. "We're stranded." Sarah turned on him. "Then we call for evac." Michael's voice was flat. Dead. "You really think they're coming?" A beat of silence. Because they all knew the truth. If someone wanted this bear contained, they weren't calling for help. They were already here. Logan's instinct screamed at him. Move, search, protect. His eyes scanned the white horizon. The wind had picked up, but the snow wasn't untouched anymore. Footprints, not theirs. Logan's throat went dry. They weren't alone. Someone was already out there, just beyond the ridge, watching, waiting. Sarah saw them next. She swallowed hard. "How long have they been here?" Michael exhaled sharply. "Long enough to make sure we don't leave." Logan's pulse pounded against his skull. They had two options. One, stay here, wait, see what happens. Second, run, and never be found again. But before he could decide, a new sound ripped through the air. A helicopter, low, thunderous, coming right for them. A black aircraft cut through the storm. No markings, no insignia. Nothing that screamed search and rescue. Sarah took a sharp step back. "Logan!" But Logan was already moving. "Get down!" They dove into the snow as the chopper circled overhead. They weren't landing. They weren't here for them. They were here for the bear. Michael cursed, his breath coming fast. "They want it alive!" Sarah's jaw tightened. Number, they want it back. And Logan realized something else. The bear had stopped moving. The infection had gone still. like it knew something was coming, like it recognized them, like it was waiting. And then the ice cracked. At first, Logan thought it was the wind, but then he felt it, a vibration beneath his feet. The snow shifted, the ice groaned, and then the ground split open. The bear jerked violently, its body convulsing again, but not like before. This was different. The wounds ripped wider, the barnacles broke apart, and something else emerged from inside, something not of this world, something that should have never been inside a living thing. A mass of tendrils, slick and black, reached toward the sky, not randomly, deliberately, like it was responding to the chopper, like it knew them, like it belonged to them. Michael stumbled backward. What the fa is that? Sarah covered her mouth. This isn't a bear anymore. Logan couldn't breathe. The infection was alive, and it was calling for home. The thing inside the bear moved, not with the sluggish, involuntary tremors of a dying animal, but with purpose. The mass of black tendrils stretched, pulsed, and then twitched toward the helicopter. Like it recognized it, like it was answering a call. Logan's stomach plummeted. This wasn't an infection, it was a signal. The chopper held steady above them, its blades slicing through the storm, still, watching, waiting. Sarah clutched Logan's arm. We have to move. But Logan couldn't move, because now he understood. They were never meant to find this bear. They were meant to clean up someone else's mistake, and if they weren't careful, they would disappear with it. Michael's voice was a sharp whisper. This thing isn't dying. He was right. The bear wasn't fighting anymore. Its body was collapsing inward, but not decomposing. It was merging with the tendrils, with the alien mass spreading through its flesh, like it had never been a bear at all. Sarah's breath was ragged. Logan, we need to go, now. But Logan's mind was already racing. They had two options. One, destroy it. Kill whatever was inside before it could spread, before it could become something worse. Two, let it go. Let the people in that chopper take it, because maybe, just maybe, it was already too late. But neither choice felt right, because Logan knew what came next. If they let them take it, it wouldn't stay buried, and if they destroyed it, it might already be inside them too. The radio crackled again. The same voice. Step back. Now. It wasn't a warning, it was a command. Sarah's expression hardened. Like hell. She moved first, reaching for her rifle. But Michael grabbed her arm. Logan froze. Sarah jerked away. What are you doing? Michael's jaw was tight, too tight. His hand hovered over his own radio, and Logan realized Michael knew. Sarah took a step back, her breath coming in short bursts. You son of a bee! Michael's hands curled into fists. We weren't supposed to intervene. His voice was flat, cold, like he wasn't just stating a fact. He was justifying it. Logan felt ice creep down his spine. How long have you known? His voice was barely a whisper. Michael didn't answer, because he didn't need to. Logan already knew. Sarah moved, fast, but Michael was faster. His rifle swung up first, and Logan had no time to think. Just react. Bang. The gunshot ripped through the frozen air. Michael staggered back. Blood spattered across the ice. Sarah's gun was still raised. She had pulled the trigger first. Michael's eyes widened, his mouth opened like he wanted to say something. But then he collapsed. The snow swallowed him whole. The chopper's floodlights blasted down on them, bright and merciless. Logan's ears rang. Sarah's hands shook, but neither of them moved, because it didn't matter anymore. Michael was gone. The thing inside the bear was still moving, still changing. And the people in that helicopter, they weren't here to help. They were here to erase every trace of what had just happened. Sarah's voice was a whisper. Logan, what do we do? Logan stared at the spreading black mass, at the thing that had once been a polar bear. And for the first time, he had no answer. Because no matter what they did next, none of them were getting out of here alive. The blades of the helicopter thundered overhead, its spotlight a blinding eye in the storm. Logan's breath came hard and fast. Michael was dead. The bear was gone. And whatever had infected it was still moving. Sarah stood beside him, her rifle trembling in her grip, her face pale beneath the ice-laced wind. There was no time left, no options. Only two undeniable truths. One, the people in that helicopter weren't here to rescue them. Two, whatever was inside the bear couldn't be allowed to leave this place, and Logan knew they were about to die. But they weren't going down without a fight. A new voice boomed over the radio, calm, commanding, unbothered. "Stand down, this doesn't concern you." Sarah let out a hollow laugh. "Like hell it doesn't." Logan barely heard her, because something else caught his eye. The infection was still moving, still growing. The black mass that had once been the bear wasn't dying. It was spreading, spilling across the ice in twitching, slithering tendrils. And worse, it was reaching for them. Logan jerked Sarah back, just as a tendril lashed out. It struck the ground where she had been a second before. Sarah cursed. "It's not just inside the bear." Logan's stomach turned. It was in the ice, in the environment. The bear had just been the first sign, and now it was waking up. Sarah was still talking, still trying to make sense of it, but Logan was already moving. They had one shot, the fuel barrels. They were still at the ridge, untouched, meant for the chopper's extraction. Logan didn't hesitate. He grabbed Sarah by the arm and ran. The tendrils lashed out, hungry. Sarah fired behind them, buying them seconds, precious seconds. The ice cracked beneath their feet as they sprinted for the barrels. Logan skidded to a stop, heart hammering against his ribs. Sarah was already there, ripping a flare from her pack. She met his gaze. "We lighted up. We're dead too." Logan didn't blink. "We're dead either way." Sarah's hands shook. Logan saw it in her face, the truth she didn't want to accept. No one was making it out of here. This wasn't a rescue. This wasn't a mission. This was a cover-up, one they weren't meant to survive. The radio crackled again, that same cold voice. "Reyes, put the flare down." Logan didn't. The tendrils twisted behind them, pulsing like a heartbeat. The chopper roared closer, the wind from its blades nearly knocking them down. The black mass surged forward. Logan took one last breath. Then, he lit the flare. The flames roared to life. The fireball erupted, swallowing the sky in an explosion of orange and black. The shockwave tore through the ice, splitting the ground beneath them. Sarah screamed. The chopper veered away just in time, thrown into a tailspin as the flames engulfed the ridge. The infection shrieked. Not a sound, not an animal, something far, far worse. Then, nothing. The fire devoured everything. The tendrils, the ice, the bear, and Logan? Logan didn't fight it. He let the flames take him. Weeks later, a search team arrived. They found nothing. No signs of the bear, no wreckage, no bodies, just scorched earth and a missing helicopter. The official report? A failed rescue, a lost team, an unfortunate accident. The truth? Burned away with the ice. Except, months later, a new report surfaced. Another bear, another infection, another mission. Because some things don't stay buried, and some monsters don't die.